Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Jerry Rabinowitz, Cecil Rosenthal, David Rosenthal, Bernice Simon, Sylvan Simon, Daniel Stein, Melvin Wax, Irving Younger. If there's anything we've learned from the Black Lives Matter movement, it's the importance of speaking their names. The names of the dead, the ones whose lives were cut short by brutality and violence, by people with weapons and malice and hate. 11 human beings, 11 Jews who came early to services 5 years ago, this coming October 27th, a minyan plus one, in an historic shul, Tree of Life Synagogue, which housed 3 congregations in Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I know some of you hail from Pittsburgh, from that very neighborhood. I don't. But I was wondering how I would feel when the jury returned its sentence this week in the trial of Robert Bowers, Yamach Shemo. And then it happened. The jury decided the state should execute Bowers, the maximum punishment, as the Jewish Telegraphic Agency put it, for the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in American history. The family of 97-year-old Rose Mallinger and her daughter Andrea Wedner, who was shot and wounded, said a measure of justice has been served. Returning a sentence of death is not a decision that comes easy, but we must hold accountable those who wish to commit such terrible acts of anti-Semitism, hate, and violence. I feel I have no right to judge Rose and Andrea's family, Joyce's family, Cecil and David's family, and their reactions to the sentence, nor the reactions of the survivors of that terrible day. And I do not judge for a moment my colleague, Rabbi Jeffrey Myers, who wrote after the verdict and sentencing came down that when the federal government, quote, decided to pursue the death penalty in this trial, I asked our congregation for their thoughts. It soon became clear that there was no clear consensus. Many supported the death penalty and many did not. Therefore, my position and that of Tree of Life congregation has been and will continue to be complete confidence in the judicial process. I have no doubt Bowers is an evil man who committed evil crimes. He seems to have understood what he did. He apparently did not express remorse for his brutal assault, saying that he saw himself as a soldier in a race war, took pride in the attack, and wished that he had shot more people. And while surely I haven't been impacted in the ways the victims and survivors have been, there's no doubt the massacre that day has altered fundamentally the American Jewish community forever. Here at Beth Am, we've developed a Bitachon Safety and Security Task Force, ably chaired by Mark Urschler. There have been first aid and active shooter trainings. We've made hardscape and signage improvements to our facility. We hire armed security guards. Many American synagogues now have metal detectors. And what I find myself thinking over and over again is not about whether Bowers deserves this punishment of death, but what it means to live in a country that allows it. For my part, when I heard the sentence, my prevailing emotion was despair. Because as we move forward or move toward the High Holy Day season and focus our attention on the necessary work of tshuva, I'm struck by the finality of death. An executed person can never learn, never grow, never strive to improve themselves. Ultimately, the only reason to execute someone is because the state feels that they don't deserve to live, and that it owes victims, families, survivors, and the broader society the catharsis, the closure one can presumably never achieve without this ultimate retribution. Punishment can, in some cases, reorient a person, make them a better or at least less dangerous player in the game of life. Capital punishment can only remove someone from the board. Even so, I'm not most concerned about what executing Robert Bowers, when and if that happens, will do to him. I'm concerned about what doing so in our names does to us. Ve'ata Yisrael ma Adonai lehecha shoel mi'imach. And now, O Israel, asks our Parsha, what does Hashem, your God, demand of you? Only this, to revere your God, to walk only in God's ways, to love and serve God with all your heart and soul, keeping Hashem's commandments and laws, which I enjoin upon you today for your good. And these mitzvot that Devarim enjoins us to follow are meant to be life-affirming. We read in Vayikra, and live by them, I am Yud He Vav He. In fact, these two short words, v'chai bahem, and live by them, inspire the Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud in Masechet Yoma, the tractate that deals with Yom Kippur, to codify the necessity of pikuach nefesh. What is pikuach nefesh? It's the concept that life is so sacred that we are commanded, not permitted, commanded to violate Shabbat or Yom Kippur if it means that we might save a life. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh said, it is stated, and the children of Israel shall keep Shabbat, to observe Shabbat. Rav Yehuda said, in the name of Shmuel, if I would have been there among those sages, I would have said that my proof is preferable to theirs. As it states, you shall keep my laws and my rules, which a person shall do and live by them, v'chai bahem, and not that he should die by them. Now, you might think that this means that the sanctity of human life demands the death penalty when a life or lives have been taken. And according to numerous sources in our tradition, that is true. The Torah and later rabbinic understanding of halacha allows for the death penalty. It says in Bamidbar, if anyone slays a person, the killer may be executed only on the evidence of witnesses. The testimony of a single witness against the person shall not suffice for a sentence of death. You may not accept a ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of a capital crime. A murderer must be put to death. Two considerations, though. One, which admittedly does not apply in the case of the Pittsburgh shooting, is what about the possibility of innocence? The evidence must be sound, writes the Rambam in the 12th century. If we do not inflict punishment, even when the offense is most probable, the worst that could happen is that someone who is really guilty will be found innocent. But if punishment was given based on estimation and circumstantial evidence, it is possible that someday an innocent person would be executed, and it is preferable and more proper that even 1,000 guilty people be set free than to someday execute even one innocent person. One of the reasons I myself have supported the abolishment of the death penalty here in Maryland, and that, unlike Rabbi Myers, I don't have full confidence, or is that, unlike him, I don't have full confidence in the judicial process. I don't trust the state never to make mistakes. And one mistake, one execution of an innocent person, I believe is a shanda. That's why the Mishnah and Sanhedrin proclaims one who saves a life, it is as if they saved an entire world, and one who takes a life, it is as if you have destroyed an entire world. And we know here in Baltimore City in Maryland, where dozens of black men were lynched in acts of racial terror in the United States, which disproportionately imprisons and executes black and brown people, that universal or even widespread acceptance of the Jewish principle that every life is sacred and infinitely valuable is hardly something that we can rely on. But it's not just Rabbi Daniel Burg or Delegate Sandy Rosenberg, our member who sponsored the legislation that ended the death penalty in this state, who feel this way, that it would be better if executions rarely or never happened. Our sages of antiquity felt much the same way. Here's Mishnah Makot. A Sanhedrin that would execute someone once in 7 years would be considered destructive. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says once in 70 years. Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva said, if we were on the Sanhedrin, nobody would ever have been executed. Did Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Akiva think no one ever deserved to be executed? I doubt it, actually. Both, tragically, would end up being martyred, executed in the most brutal fashion by the Roman Empire. I suspect they just didn't want us to be like that, like the Romans. The problem I would submit to you with the death penalty, the fundamental problem is that it allows us to become, as philosopher Albert Camus puts it, premeditated killers. There are many things in this world that feel satisfying in the moment, even cathartic. But how many of those things provide lasting fulfillment? Chevra, my sincere prayer, and I promise you I mean this, is that the survivors and family members of those who were murdered in Shul on October 27th, 2018, do find closure from this sentence. As surely they, like I think all of us, find some sense of meaning and closure from the verdict. But I wonder whether we human beings in a world where people can be so hateful, so cruel as to gun down senior citizens in their house of worship, I wonder whether the very best set of options available to us ought to include an act of vengeance that is so necessarily violent and permanent. The question for me isn't whether people should be glad when Robert Bowers is dead. I think on some level I will. That's the truth. The question is whether satisfaction and catharsis ought to be tied ever to the snuffing out of human life. Shabbat Shalom.